But the sight of the bomber streams also filled Horn with anxiety. Like the prisoners he interrogated, he had been born, raised, and educated in Germany. He never knew whether one of the bombers would be dropping its payload within range of his family's home in Heidelberg, or if, as he looked into the holding pens at the forlorn faces of captured and wounded prisoners, he would one day see the face of his older brother, Rudolf. Lieutenant Horn's orders that winter were to help ascertain whether Hitler would unleash chemical or biological weapons when the Allied army crossed the Rhine River into the German heartland. It had been rumored that the Germans, in a last desperate attempt to break the vice of the approaching Allied forces, would resort to using such weapons, as they had in the trenches in France 27 years earlier. Patton's Mobile Intelligence Unit had prepared a detailed questionnaire to ferret out the truth. Interrogators did not ask prisoners directly about weapons stockpiles. Rather, they elicited the information from 4 out of 150 seemingly random questions put to the prisoners. The answers would be used to determine if the soldiers had been taught how to use chemical or biological weapons in battle, and if, hidden behind enemy lines, shelters were in place to protect the civilian population. 1,500 rank-and-file soldiers, selected from Wehrmacht infantry captured in Belgium after the Battle of the Bulge, had been marched to Namur for this purpose. The interrogation facilities being inadequate, many of the interviews took place out of doors. Horn's office, just beyond the prisoner enclosures, consisted of 2 empty orange crates, a small desk borrowed from a nearby elementary school, and a stack of questionnaires and pencils. Horn had already interviewed 35 prisoners on February 23, 1945, when a camp guard brought him 48-year-old Private Fritz Huber from the German 2nd Panzer Division. Lean and haggard, with a narrow face distinguished by an enormous hooked nose, Huber wore the same ill-fitting uniform in which he had been captured 3 weeks earlier. Though old by Allied Army standards, Huber was not an unusual Wehrmacht recruit, as the Germans, after more than 5 years of continuous warfare, were drafting soldiers as young as 16 and as old as 60, mixing them into units of battle-hardened veterans and having them dig trenches, run interference, and haul equipment on their backs or in carts. German manpower, a resource like the diesel fuel to drive their tanks, was now in short supply. Huber, recruited in Nürnberg, had received less than a month's training before being marched through the snow into combat in Belgium. He didn't know anything about chemical or biological weapons. Horn checked off the private's answers in rapid succession, obtaining nothing more than yes, no, and I don't know. The interview completed, Horn was ready to dismiss his prisoner, but, as the lieutenant would later note in a detailed account of the interview, he suddenly changed his mind. Looking across the table at the pitiful Private Huber, hunched over from lack of sleep and clearly suffering from rheumatism in the damp cold, Horn offered Huber a cigarette and a cup of coffee, and asked if there was anything he knew that might interest Army intelligence. Huber contorted his face like a schoolboy who had flunked an exam. Tears welled up in his eyes. He wanted to help, to be of service. The lieutenant had witnessed reactions of this kind before. He saw it nearly every day among prisoners who had lost everything but their lives. Men like Huber, recruited off the streets by the Gestapo or forcefully removed from their homes and pressed into service for the fatherland, were neither dedicated nor arrogant Nazis. Many of them had already lost sons, daughters, and wives in the war, or had seen their homes and apartment buildings incinerated. They were reluctant warriors. Having given themselves up to the enemy, been stripped of their possessions, and herded like cattle into holding pens, most had lost the last shreds of self-respect. As a final indignity, they now saw and heard the endless streams of bombers overhead and knew that their situation was truly hopeless. Hermann Goering's new and much-vaunted Messerschmitt jet interceptors were nowhere to be seen. If Hitler actually possessed a secret weapon that would turn the tide of the war, as propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels had promised the German people, he would have used it by now.